Hi everyone, this is Janine from Pangolin Photo Safaris. Thank you for joining me for this little review session in which I will try and share 5 tips and tricks with you that might help you choose the best image for a competition, or that simply helps you narrow down a selection of images to the one and only keeper. For this demonstration, I have been using images from our photo competition, particularly the Birds of the World photo gallery by participants that were kind enough to agree that their images might be used. I have also taken the freedom to adjust these images in Photoshop to help you visualize what I mean. Throughout this, please keep in mind that photography is an art, and art is subjective. At the end, it is most important that you like your image as it is, and no one can tell you not to. So now let's get started. My first tip is discussing the composition of a photograph. The first image I chose is a beautiful image taken in Portugal of a great reed warbler, proving to us that any bird can make for a nice, moody, and even powerful image. The subtle tones are elevating the red of the beak, and the messy but almost regular and arty background creates a great atmosphere. However, I wish this bird would have had the space it is singing into open in front of its face and a bit more space towards the tail. It is simply sitting on the wrong side of the picture, with the frame on the right cutting off his beautiful song. Tight crops are often the case with images submitted to us. I would love to see more space into the direction the animal is moving or looking into, especially so if we have a nice clean background. This is something called negative space, the space around your subject, which then ideally helps you emphasize your subject or helps the storytelling. By keeping more space in front of the bird, your imagination can better follow the anticipated movement, look, or stare. This image kept a beautiful amount of space in front of the bird's face. Some people might say that you are not allowed to crop an animal halfway through though. I personally don't mind the crop in this instance. It lays focus on the face and the snack of the bee eater. They say learn the rules like a pro, but that doesn't mean that you can't break them like an artist. That is proof for our own individualism and creativity. When thinking about composition though, it is not just about the animal's position within the frame, but also the animal's position per se. This image of a hornbill looks amazing. The focus is dead smack center on the eyes, emphasizing those beautiful eyelashes. And the timing is phenomenal, catching the cricket mid-air. The crop is close enough to not seem accidental, showing the viewer that it is all about the face, while creating a beautiful smooth background due to the close proximity to the subject. However, the hornbill is unfortunately turning away from the viewer. While I still think it is a really stunning image, little details like that can make a huge difference when competing with thousands of others. Remember, most of the time we want to see the animal's head turned 180 degrees towards us, unless facing away is really part of the story that is being told. If this review is helping you with your photo selection at home, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. My second tip deals with the adjustment of details within your image. We all know that raw files need to be sharpened and fine-tuned, which is perfectly legit in a competition. Adjusting the details can be a tricky business, however. This beautiful image of a malachite kingfisher eating a small crayfish is full of phenomenal colors and sporting a gorgeous smooth background. The timing is simply spot on, and the crayfish's limbs are not even reaching across the eye. However, something struck me as odd, and while I was looking at it, I felt the image almost had a soft watercolor feel to it. This is usually the case when noise reduction gets applied to the image. And when looking at the metadata, my initial suspicion was confirmed as it was shot on an ISO 5000. I prefer keeping a bit of noise within my subject to retain the grip, the sharpness and the texture rather than smoothing it through noise reduction and risking to lose the texture. I would have also kept even more space towards the right side and stuck to the original format, as it feels like he has space to give towards the top that misses on the right. Fine adjusting your image is a very fine line to walk, and often quite challenging, as the same can happen the other way around when you find yourself creating too much sharpness, clarity and texture, which then creates digital noise, almost a crunchy look. Editing your image on 100% can help you avoid over-sharpening. A softer look will emphasize the amazing colors created by dawn that are playing within the light and shadow of these beautifully painted pelicans. My third trick one can apply is using local adjustments throughout your editing that either sharpens or alternatively reduces the noise within an image only in certain areas. Which brings me to my next image. This photographer got an amazing angle of a leopard-faced vulture, which makes the vulture look even more towering than his massive size already suggests. The photographer also did exactly as suggested in the previous images and applied a local adjustment brush in order to edit certain parts of this image. However, one needs to be very careful when changing anything related to the exposure of an image to only a certain area. If one hasn't masked the image precisely, it creates a funny halo effect like seen here. In general, one needs to be careful in order to emphasize an animal's best potential subtly. This grey heron catching a fish is beautifully placed in front of the small white flowers, which almost creates a bottom frame, a windowsill that pulls the viewer in. The strong vignette, however, takes away from that impression, and while certainly emphasizing the heron, it becomes too obvious in the otherwise natural surroundings. A more subtle way of achieving an indirect emphasis on the heron would be a radial filter, for instance, that bleeds in more carefully and can be placed off-center if needed. My fourth recommendation is to double-check your settings at all times when choosing your photographs for a competition. They can tell you so much about your image. This image almost has it all. It is shot in the beautiful golden light, backlit, with the sun rays shining through the wings and the beak. And it tells an action-packed story. Looking at the settings, it was shot on 800ths of a second with a focal length of 500mm, which immediately explains the motion blur that is visible. My personal recommendation is to always shoot double your focal length in order to ensure a sharp and crisp image. That is for a stationary subject, only accounting for your own shake. For a bird in flight, I would try to shoot at least 0.002 of a second, if not faster, to make sure I freeze the action. On the other hand, I feel like we need to be more brave when it comes to slow motion panning shots. This image creates the perfect panning background with the streaks blurring out the busyness. But somehow the image doesn't seem neither perfectly sharp nor perfectly blurred. Ideally, the limbs of the animal, or the wings of the bird in this case, should become more translucent, blurry, painted, in order to show the movement in the animal with the eye being perfectly sharp. Looking at the shutter speed, I see it was shot on 250th of a second. That is still too fast to create that effect. A slower shutter of only around 50th of a second would make it more difficult to get the face sharp, but would also create a stronger effect in the wings and soften the background even further. But it is not all just about the shutter. This beautiful male wood duck displays an astounding amount of colors in the golden light. It is turned exactly 180 degrees towards us and is beautifully sharp. But I almost find it too sharp. The background, even though it is nice and even in color, is just too dominant, and my eyes like to analyze every single wave on the picture. Checking the metadata, I see the image is photographed with an RF f11 lens, which explains the high depth of field and detail in this image. I would prefer seeing a stronger bokeh, as it will keep my eyes fixed on the subject instead. Shooting on eye level with the duck is the only way one could have created a softer look with a fixed f11 lens. That way you would have set the duck against the background that is physically further away, the horizon. Which brings me to my last tip. Always look out for your backgrounds. Your backgrounds are just as important as your subject itself. This Swainson spurfowl is singing its lungs out in the early morning, or maybe warning other animals about the presence of a predator. Proud, with a beautiful bouquet, it stands nicely elevated, which provides it with enough separation to its background in order to blur it out. Except for the unfortunate branch that reaches straight through the neck. While the photographer did everything right, this is something nature does to us on a regular basis. Sometimes finding a different angle or choosing a different individual in a group might help, but often we have no other choice. Foregrounds as well can be tricky, as they can easily cut off part of our animal. It can seem like a really nice frame in some pictures. However, in other instances, it can cause us to lose vital parts of the animal, such as the tip of the beak in this picture. A rule of thumb is that if you just lose a body part, it usually looks like an accident. I really hope this review helped you with your photo selection at home. But please remember, it is most important to have fun, enjoy, and show us and the world how beautiful nature is out there. Have a great day. Bye-bye.